Okay, good morning everyone, and a warm welcome to each and every one of you to IIT Palakkad and also this Gyan course, that is Ethnographic Perspectives and Methods, Culture and Health. So I welcome you all, and also I would like to introduce our faculty, foreign faculty who will be leading our course. I'm really happy that the whole course is led by Professor Murphy Halliburton. So he teaches in the anthropology department at Queen's College, and he has done his anthropology PhD program at the Graduate Center of City University of New York. He specializes in medical and psychological anthropology and science and technology studies. And the anthropology of South Asia. His work involves long-term critical engagement with biomedical psychiatric practices based on fieldwork in southern India and the United States. He has also tracked the effects of global patent policies on pharmaceutical production and biopiracy in India, and he's currently investigating peer-led alternatives to mainstream psychiatry in the northeastern United States. He's the author of Mud Packs and Prozac, Experiencing Ayurvedic, Biomedical and Religious Healing, and India and the Patent Wars, which was published in 2017. And also, as our coordinator, course coordinator, Dr. Sudarshan couldn't join due to some emergencies. So we have our chairman of continuing education, Center for Continuing Education, Dr. Kanmani over here. So I thank him for his presence. So I invite and hand over the session to Professor Murphy.
Okay, I guess I'm going to take some time getting used to this format. It's I feel like I'm in a TV studio. and I was coached by our tech people yesterday on how to, timing and how to move and where I should go. So it may not be perfect at the beginning. There's lots of things we need to do to make sure that the people online can see. But also, for the people who are here, I want to make sure that we have, also a good interaction. I want to get, your opinions and views of things because you have an important experience, and I think working, dialogically is very important. Though I guess this is also a note to people who are online, sometimes you may not hear all of the comments from the students, as the tech people told me, but occasionally I'll repeat something. Maybe I'll repeat a question or a point so that the people online can hear certain points, but they're not going to get everything. Part of this class will be, lecture, and part of it conversational. I don't know what is the normal thing that you do in Indian universities, but in my practices, I don't want to simply do what we call a content dump. Dump content on the students and go away. I want to see, if the students are understanding certain things from the readings. And I like to kind of make some of the points that I'm trying to make in conversation, rather than just telling you, what the answer is or what some important point is. And yes, I mean, you've introduced yourselves already, and I'll have to spend some more time getting to know you. Nazmia printed up for me the list of everybody's answers about their interest in this course and what they're doing, and there's an amazing variety of expertise here in this room. Some people are even seasoned professionals and, a professor, from the Achyuta Menon Center over here, where I was based in 2014, an earlier research project. And also on the theme of getting to know you and involving your own interaction, you heard from Biju, in the introductions. So Biju has also been my research assistant since the 1990s. I have been working in Kerala. Enika Kurchamalayam Ariam, Parichu, Lakshay. I can't do like interviews, difficult subjects in Malayalam. So I had Biju helping me. So Nazmiya mentioned my first book, Mud, Pax, and Prozac, and he's in there. And he's accompanying me to the medical college hospital, Ayurveda Medical College, Ayurveda, Government Ayurveda Mental Hospital in Kottakkal, Vettakat Bali, Chotanakita Temple, yeah, and other places that have different approaches to mental health problems, and Bhimapalli, Vetakatpalli. we went to get, and among the religious centers, we went to one Hindu, one Muslim, one Christian, because that represents the diversity of Kerala. And so, Biju has some expertise on ethnography. He works at Ayurveda College, in the administration, but he's also an ethnographer by practical training. And he also helped me, in other research projects in 2014. And I did a project on recovery from serious mental illness, from the diagnosis of schizophrenia, trying to explain the finding from the World Health Organization that the developing countries, India especially, had better outcomes for people with these diagnoses. And so I did interviews, along with Biju's help, in several places in Trivandrum, people diagnosed with schizophrenia. So he also helped in that. So he'll have some expertise to share as well from field work. So this actually, to give a few introductory remarks about teaching this course. I know that in Indian English, at least in Kerala, people say taking this course, which it means the opposite in American English. Students take the course, and the professor teaches the course. So when I say, so that's my vocabulary. In teaching this course, sorry? Giving the class. Oh, giving the class, or giving the class. That's good. Yeah, that works in Indian English. I'm giving the class. Yeah. Okay. Maybe no. Okay. Teaching, we all understand. This is a unique opportunity to do this. I was invited. I'll just scroll up a bit. You have my information here this is the course syllabus that you probably refer. I was invited by the Dr. Sudarshan Kote, who is here, who I know. I met him years ago when I gave a talk in IIT Hyderabad when he was a student. I was an outside reader for his PhD dissertation on mental health, mental hospitals. A terrific research project. And so he invited me, last fall, October sometime, to apply for this Gyan fellowship. He and I together had to apply, like a grant proposal, and we were lucky to get this, so I get to be here. He's still attending to some, maybe having urgent dental surgery right now. We're not sure. So and is not yet in campus. So, but we'll see. He's busy with many commitments, and hopefully you'll get to see him. But I'm not sure if we will. Anyway, I just want to acknowledge his work in getting this. And for me, this is a great opportunity because I've been doing research in Kerala since 1997. Not continuously. Once every 5 years, I've been able to come. For 1 year in 1997. Then some short visits, also for 1 year in 2014. And then a short visit in 2019. So, I've been back and forth to Kerala, did 2 major research projects. 3 actually, including so a little bit more about my work. Nazmiya told you some of the publications. My first book, Mud, Pax, and Prozac, is based on field work I did with Biju at the several mental hospitals in Kerala, allopathic mental hospitals, and mostly one Ayurvedic mental health centers, though I visited other places that use Ayurveda to deal with mental health problems. And I also looked at religious healing, so people who use, who go to temples, mosques, churches to deal with the same problems. So I was trying to look at the three main different approaches to mental health in Kerala. I won't go into the details of my finding. I'll speak about that occasionally throughout the course, but just want to mention that was the first book and research project. My second project, as I became interested in Ayurveda in the first project, I remember I was, we anthropologists, we shift around in our topics. But there's always something tying the topic to the previous one. For me, it was Ayurveda. I was learning about Ayurvedic treatments and remembering at the time I was told that a lot of people working in Ayurvedic pharmacognosy, kind of research into medicinal plants, they couldn't speak freely, to me, a researcher, about what they were doing, because at that time India was concerned about what's called biopiracy, that global big pharma was going to come steal local ideas, which actually had already been happening for a long time before that. But in any case, India developed this, traditional knowledge, digital library to protect indigenous knowledge. There was controversy around the world about drugs for HIV/AIDS. That this was a while now, like late 90s. Early 2000s, that these drugs would save people's lives, but they're very expensive. And then Indian pharmaceutical companies began to make very affordable versions of these drugs. Big pharma companies went to court to stop them, claiming patent rights over these drugs, and it became a big public health debate. So I followed those issues for some time and looked at at the same time, the debate about the control of drugs, the WTO, international patent regimes, and Ayurveda, biopiracy, all of these things together, what I called in my title of my book, the patent wars, India and the patent wars. I also interviewed people from big pharma, pharmaceutical companies, which was very hard. They don't like to talk to researchers like everyday people do. But after lots of struggle and a lot of time, I did get a few interviews. So I've also treated pharmaceutical representatives as research subjects to get their opinion about these patent controversies. And in 2013, 2014, I came back to India. I had a Fulbright grant, a Fulbright Nehru grant, which some of you may know of, which sadly is maybe eliminated by the US side. I mean, Donald Trump is cutting research funding dramatically, and we have like 25% of the funding we used to have. And Fulbright is slated to lose 90%. But I don't know what's going to happen in India because it's Fulbright Nehru. It used to be India, US gave half and half. So maybe the US will be convinced to, Fulbright India is only half price, and they can continue this program. I hope it continues. So anyway, I came here on a Fulbright grant in 2013, 2014 to research the outcomes that I mentioned of the WHO finding of better outcomes in developing countries for people with serious mental illness. And I mentioned just now the research I did, again, with Biju's help at that time, at different centers, mostly around Trivandrum, were people who had a diagnosis of schizophrenia or related psychosis. And I've written several articles on that, no book on that topic, but several articles trying to explain why India has good outcomes, better than the West, okay, in this. I think that's one of the most provocative findings, that has not been followed up on enough. I mean, I have, a few others have spoken about it, but if India is doing better, shouldn't we find out what they're doing right and apply it to places that are doing poorly? Instead, we just kind of, we and the people in power in the world and the West just sort of export the Western model, assuming that's what everybody needs more of. So it's more complex. Anyway, so I've had this long span of having done research in India, and so it's a pleasure. It's like a special opportunity, I guess even a sense of obligation to be able to teach this course, to be able to use the findings I've done based on research here, in a college here. I've spoken about these findings at many international conferences with scholars from India and scholars from all over the world, but that's the special, global academic space that is different, is not accessible to everybody in the same way. So I'm glad to be here at a university in India, being able to talk about these topics. Okay, yeah, let me go over, sorry, one more thing about my own research. I mentioned all the work I've done in India. Currently, my most recent research project is in the US. After a long time working on it, India, I feel, actually working on a different culture here, I think it helps me to understand my own culture in a different way. And so I'm doing work on something called the Hearing Voices movement. The Hearing Voices movement. Briefly, it's a movement, sort of an alternative to mainstream psychiatry, where people who hear voices help other voice hearers deal with the voices. So I'm interviewing people. It's all peer-led. Your expertise comes from your own struggle with voice hearing. Many voice hearers say that they find that even with medications, most of them say the voices don't go away. And the hearing voices, people have decided instead of getting rid of the voices, they are able to improve their relationship to the voices. And that's one of the things they've been. So I've been interviewing people who are involved in this and who are in hearing voices groups in the US, and something also called open dialogue, which is a method of intervention in psychosis that's mostly about dialogue. It started in Finland. I did a training in Finland on open dialogue. It's been clinically tested in the British National Health Service on a large scale. And actually, and this may be an interesting, there's no result yet of the clinical trials in the UK, but it may become a mainstream form of therapy in the UK. In the US, it's not very developed. There's individuals who do open dialogue, and I've interviewed them. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'll give you some insights from my work in India and from the US as well. Okay, let's go over this. This is the course syllabus. Is that what you call this in India? It seemed to be an unfamiliar term when I was dialoguing, or course schedule. Syllabus is what you use? Okay. I was anyway, I was saying, here's the syllabus, and my response would be, this is a good schedule. Have you finished the schedule? I thought, maybe I'm not using the right term. And maybe my terminology can be confusing to you too, because I'm speaking, a different style of English, but it's also one that's very much in mainstream media. So, yeah.
If you don't mind, can I come closer?
Yeah, sure, of course.
If I could suggest to you to speak at the 0.75 speed.
Oh, yes, okay.
It will be, I don't know if it is only my difficulty or everyone's difficulty, that we are at times not following a word or two from what you are saying.
Okay.
So if the speed is a little less,
okay.
I don't intend to offend
or
disturb. Forgive me, please.
Yeah. Okay, no, I will try. Yeah, it's difficult to consciously slow down. Linguistic difference. Because you are all fluent in English. I just assume I can just speak quickly. So I'll try to remember, but I mean, as I become absorbed in the topic, I may forget, and I may go faster. So you can remind me. You can remind me, or you can ask me to repeat, something. So maybe let me just go over the syllabus for the course. I mean, I guess it's a course. Maybe it's also something like a workshop. I don't know how you're thinking of it. It's, just because it's 2 weeks, that's not the normal course length of time. Let me just remind myself how I'm scrolling up and down here. Okay, so let me just go over this. I'm not going to read this just for the sake of time because you have all seen it. But I don't know, the people online, maybe they haven't seen this document, so I'll just read out what it says here because it was sent to you, right? So you've all seen it, yeah. But then the online crowd, well, they can read it here now. So hopefully, those of you online, this is, this tells about the overview of this course. It mentions that it's particularly useful for students in anthropology, psychology, sociology, public health, and related fields. These fields are all connected to one another, I think very intimately. The field of medical anthropology, I'm just reading what it says here. For the people online, when I do this, I'm pointing at the screen over here. I know the tech people said they may not see, they don't see all parts of the room. The field of medical anthropology, it says up here, examines health, illness, and forms of healing in their social and cultural contexts, which can profoundly shape conceptions of illness and illness outcomes. The course, down here now. The course provides ethnographic case studies from different parts of the world, which students will examine in relation to cases from India and other parts of South Asia. A section of the class will focus on mental health, which is especially shaped by its cultural milieu, and the readings will consider studies of how the treatment of mental illness in India is affected by the international movement for global mental health. That's something I particularly have written on. Particular readings will demonstrate certain positive features of India's capacity to cope with mental illness, which ideally should not be compromised as the country's mental health treatment policies respond to the movement for global mental health. Okay, let me move down. So in addition to lectures and discussion, this course allows students who are working on research projects such as a graduate thesis, many of you are doing, a chance to present their work in class to get feedback on qualitative research methods. So we'll have some time maybe where some of you can talk about what you're working on or maybe problems that you're stuck with and have some conversational interaction. And then at the bottom it says that I will share my experience conducting fieldwork in India and the US to help students become aware of the variety of methods available for studying culture and health. Several objectives of the course: to understand the degree to which health and illness are shaped by social and cultural forces. Number two, to develop comparative insights from reading and discussing case studies from around the world. I'm trying to diversify the geography of the case studies we have. Learn about ethnographic research methods used in anthropology and other social sciences. And assess the opportunities and challenges of mental health practices in India. I know from what several of you said in your introductions and what you wrote, many of you are interested in methods. This course is culture and health, ethnographic perspectives and methods, so it won't be all methods. The part of it, is to read ethnographic pieces and understand how they're done, but also to look at the methods of doing ethnography. And there'll be some actual exercises that we will do in some later classes where you'll go out and you do, the people online won't be able to do this, but you'll go out, maybe halfway through the class, you'll go out and do some ethnographic practice. Those modules were designed by Dr. Sudarshan for this course. So I put my expectations and evaluations. This seminar requires active student involvement. Students must complete the assigned readings and come to class prepared to discuss them. That's what I tell my undergraduates in the US, but you're much more advanced students. 18-year-old American men and women are not very good at being prepared for class, but I assume you will be. Student evaluations will be based on class participation and a final assessment on July 20th. Now, we're required to do some kind of assessment exam. I'm not sure the form of that. I want to speak to Dr. Sudarshan when he gets here to get a better understand what might be the right kind of thing. Maybe some paper. I mean, since many of you have your own research projects, maybe there might be some paper you submit in which you connect some issues in the course to things you are working on for your own, if that is a possibility. I'm not sure what the expectations are. The schedule also has us going up until the 19th, a week from Saturday in class, and the next day is the scheduled exam day, which to me seems like too little time to do anything. So I'll speak to Dr. Sudarshan again and understand the requirements. Maybe I can just have you, send me by email, on the 21st or something, some written thing. So we don't actually, you have time to work on this. Anyway, so some of those details will be figured out further. Also, because of AI, I feel like I need to put this up here. Please, read the readings themselves. Even when I'm opening the readings on my own laptop, I just opened the Claude Lévi-Strauss article that I gave you for today, which we'll talk about later. And right at the top, the PDF program says, this is a long article and it's complicated. Would you like a general summary? And so it's just in our faces all the time. But the problem with AI, is that it as it says, I said the use of AI assistance in completing readings and assignments in this course is not allowed. AI tends to offer general implications of readings, but it is not able to discuss specific examples from readings. In this case, the ethnographic material that is central to this course. So the actual ethnographic examples, the real story that happens in the readings is something that I know from my student papers in the US, the ones that are using AI have perfect, sophisticated discussion of all the meanings in connection to current social theory, but they can't tell me anything that happened in the book. there's no, and I think AI actually is still limited. There's actually legal battles, trying to limit AI from simply going inside every book and absorbing all of it. Authors are saying, no, this is our creation, AI can't. We'll see what happens. So it's my understanding that AI, if you assign some ethnography, in India, like Tulsi Srinivasa's The Cow in the Elevator, the University of California Press, AI doesn't know what's in that book. It can't look inside. It can't give examples from a certain page. It can tell you the meaning of the book. It can tell you because it reads all of the reviews and other external materials. So that's why it tends to offer these often very sophisticated general explanations of the implications. But anyway, moving further, students should become familiar with both theory and specific cases from the readings and not outsource their thinking to artificial assistants. And sometimes I tell my students, if they're taking my class and using AI to help them, it's like going to the gym and bringing a robot that will do the exercise for you. You won't get the benefits yourself if you do this. So this is our schedule. Now, in the US, I've also taught a summer course, I think 3.5 weeks we did. And I found that it's very difficult to keep up with the readings. Normally, in the kind of schedule we have, your course may meet Tuesday, Thursday, and you have some time between Tuesday and Thursday to do some readings, and you have some time between Thursday and the next Tuesday. But if you're meeting every day, it's difficult. I want to just mention that, acknowledge if you're struggling, You know, I will be struggling too. I reread this material, and so I've assigned these 3 readings for today because to keep on schedule, we need readings for the first day. And I hope you're all able to access these readings. Is that correct? You should have, I guess, received a folder, with PDFs of everything. Okay, so, and today's topic is intended to be an introduction to medical anthropology, to this field. The subtitle, Early Medical Anthropology, Ritual Healing and Community, is sort of just indicating that these readings show you the beginning of the field. We're going chronologically at the very beginning here. And then we'll move on to more recent, as it were, material starting tomorrow. So I'll just preview some of the topics. So culture and health, well, that's the name of the course, but that's only part of the social interaction. So these 3 works are meant to represent how culture, this thing that anthropologists, even after decades of studying culture, we still can't define what it is. And we don't even like the concept much anymore. But it's also what we do. So it's a slippery term, but and I'll be discussing some social theory too, because very much, in social theory, culture was sort of an innocent term, just a set of values. But then we realize culture is shot through with social hierarchies and inequalities, and it's not just, values, it's also what we call hegemony, in social theory. Maybe that's a term some of you use and some of you don't yet. So these are 3 works that I chose to represent this idea of really something like cultural difference, more than the social, more than the economic. Obiasekere, Gananath Obiasekere, has anybody heard of him before? You have? Oh, great, okay. He's wonderful, recently died at 90-something. He's an anthropologist from Sri Lanka, and Depression Buddhism and the Work of Culture in Sri Lanka, to me, is a classic article. Brilliant, insightful article about how basically what in Western psychology is called depression would be an insight into life in Buddhism. And he gives you some very good ethnographic examples from his work in Sri Lanka. We also have China represented. But this is very recent. Obiasekere is a classic, 1985. Li Zhang, recent book from 2020, which is about sort of how, anxious China, inner revolution and politics of psychotherapy, how Western psychology basically works in China. It doesn't work the same way it does in the West. It doesn't work the same way, people adopt and make it their own Chinese version of Western psychology. Actually, that's good, thank you, because I was just thinking my voice is going. If I have a cup to go with this, that will help. And in each of these cases, what I've assigned is either just an article, like Obiasekere's piece appeared in an edited volume, so you just have one article, or one chapter of one book. So for Li Zhang's book, I've just given you one particular chapter that I thought did a good job of showing you how psychology, Western psychology, is made Chinese in her ethnography. And then I included Stacy Langwick. I'm reading her full ethnography right now, so I figured that, this is fresh in my mind. It might be good in class, and it's Africa. Okay, so now we have some. I'm intending to produce some examples of culture, how culture affects health, ideas of health from different parts of the world. These are just introductory case studies that I think are really useful to understand what ethnography is, what anthropologists do. But then, because as I said, culture is considered sort of a naive term in social theory today, because it kind of ignores power. We have a section on medicine and power that, calling attention to the inequalities or social structural things that affect how people act and what they believe. What people believe isn't just due to their culture, it's due to a social structure that makes them think in certain ways. And so I'm including a little bit of Foucault over here, Michel Foucault. Are some of you already familiar with him? Just, I'm seeing lots of nodding. Okay, so he's, well, we'll get to him when we get to him. It's difficult to summarize. He's very provocative and original in his perspective, and this is from his classic Madness and Civilization, which is a history of, not mental illness, because that's the category at the end of the book. It's the history of madness, or la folie in French is his term, which translates also as folly. And he shows how these states have been engaged differently over history. And he gives us a way of thinking about power that's different from, say, some people contrast him to like Marxist explanations. Marx is very much about capital, money. Foucault says like power is everywhere and it comes from everywhere, and it's a different view of power, but both are important too. The second reading is the more traditional view of power from Ida Susser. She's my colleague at the CUNY Graduate Center, or in the PhD program in anthropology, Ida Susser. She this study is a study of Union Carbide, which is a company India knows very well from the disaster in Bhopal. And in this study, it shows how Union Carbide's practices in Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, affected communities and how people resisted certain practices. It's a really good example of what we call political economy, which is sort of the, not Foucauldian, but critical, often Marxist-informed studies of power and social inequality. There's a field called critical medical anthropology. That's the label for this, for the work, this kind of work. And then I'll show you during part of the class a film, also from critical medical anthropologists, also about what I call humanitarian medicine, featuring the work of Paul Farmer. Do some of you know of Paul Farmer? Is he one of you nodding? Okay, you've heard. Oh, behind you, yeah.
Yeah, we had during the first year we had the meeting from Paul Farmer, but I don't remember exactly.
I see. Yeah, okay. He's famous. Well, you'll see in the film. We'll get to it. Okay. He worked in Haiti, in Peru. He works with the poor. He tries to show how the lack of health care to the poor is really not just because is because of the lack of political will. That's like his main point. And he started this organization, Partners in Health, to deliver health care to the poor. And in some ways, very effectively, it's a film. This all has to do with medicine and power and social inequality. Then we have a section on non-biomedical systems of medicine, featuring Ayurveda, Unani, and Chinese medicine. This is one of the things I have worked on. We'll read Harish Narayan Das, one of my favorite medical anthropologists. He's just retired from JNU. I just saw him in Delhi last week before I came down here, and he's actually retired from there, but then just took up a job teaching at Ashoka University. I'm beginning to understand that's how the system works in India. Some people, they have to retire at 65, but they're not really done teaching, so they're able to find some other position that they're allowed to work on sort of contract basis. Does that sound, am I understanding the system correctly? Okay. So he's very much active, and I think this is just an excellent piece, his study of an Ayurvedic practitioner in Chennai, and we'll come to understand what kind of insights he's developed about that. Also, the second reading, Claudia Long and Eva Janssen, they're two anthropologists from Germany who I know well, and they worked like me on mental health and Ayurveda. I think this article does a really good job of it. Basically, they explain how Ayurvedic psychiatry in Kerala understands depression, how they've sort of taken the category depression and adopted it and explained it in Ayurvedic categories, but at the same time they have their own Ayurvedic categories, like Kapot Madam is one of them. It's like similar to depression, but it's different. So it's a discussion of these different diagnostic categories and their overlap and their negotiation. You know, what does an Ayurvedic doctor do when all of their patients come in already having been diagnosed by allopathic doctor and speaking the language of allopathic terminology? And so Ayurveda kind of appropriates depression, as the title says, tries to adapt. We'll get a little, some insights into Chinese medicine from Kuriyama's book. I just assigned this chapter 2 from The Expressiveness of the Body and the Divergence of Greek and Chinese Medicine. Kuriyama is an amazing scholar. I'm just so impressed by this book. He does the best job I have ever seen of trying to explain, trying to compare Western medicine with another medical system. And he beautifully tells you how sort of the different systems of thinking in Chinese medicine. And it says Greek medicine, right, rather than allopathy, because he is actually looking at the early period. He looks at early Greek medicine and he looks at Chinese medicine around the same time. But then he also jumps to the present and allopathy. So it's, and we'll be discussing chapter 2. And then we'll have this guest speaker. Okay, so we have Rennie Thomas, who some of you must know, right? Who's from Bhopal? Yeah. And was there another student from Bhopal here?
I'm from Bhopal.
Sorry?
I'm from Bhopal, the same institution.
Oh yeah, right. But was there another student in this from?
No,
You're the only one here from.
No,
I'm just wondering if I think Rennie told me there was 2 students.
was there.
Yeah.
He's there, but I'm not doing a PhD under him. But
Right.
He's in our department.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So Rennie Thomas, who you know from IISER Bhopal.
He told me he's coming.
Okay. Yeah. He told me one of his students. Well, he told me 2 were coming, but I guess just one, just you.
One is not coming. So at the end, she changed.
I see. She changed. I see. Okay. So just you. Okay. And he happens to be here in Kerala because he's from Kerala. He's in Trivandrum visiting his family. So I invited him to come speak about. He's been working on. Sorry. Malayali. Yeah. Rennie Thomas. Yeah. He's from Trivandrum. Yeah. So he'll be speaking on his work on Unani medicine, and he'll also speak on ethnography of the laboratory, which is, studying allopathic science, biomedical science, Western science as a cultural practice. He'll be talking about that as well. This section is on Module C, as you see at the top, reading and doing ethnography. The first 3 are examples, ethnographic case studies from around the world, from pretty recent work. One on cancer in Africa, Julie Livingston, the first book, a chapter from that. Cecilia Van Hollen on South India, it's about, she did research in Tamil Nadu about, it's a excellent article about how, forgetting my words, how anesthetic is used and not used in childbirth in Tamil Nadu. It's great, sort of coming together of culture and the sort of economic structure, like, which is, you know, how many patients are being born in Chennai hospitals and how available an anesthesiologist is. And it's a great example from India. From the US, my colleague, another colleague from the CUNY Graduate Center PhD program in anthropology, Donna Davis, will read the introduction of Reproductive Injustice, Racism, Pregnancy, and Premature Birth. She studied childbirth experiences among Black American women, and there's a huge difference in maternal mortality between Black and white American women in childbirth. I mean, and it's not just because of like income difference. Even if you control for class and education, you still have a big difference. And so she was trying to understand in this book why. I mean, racism obviously is part of the answer, but it's, you know, more explanation. We'll read one chapter from that. And then to look more closely at ethnographic methods, on what day are we on now? We're like next week sometime. We'll have a chapter from Russell Bernard, his book, you know, big giant guide, Research Methods in Anthropology, Qualitative and Quantitative Approaches. So you sort of have a how-to. I just picked a chapter on interviewing, on semi-structured interviewing, which is one of the methods that's most central to this kind of work that you see here. And that what Biju and I did were semi-structured interviews. And sometimes they were unstructured, where we allowed the conversation to go wherever it went. And the third reading, Seth Holmes, Fresh Fruit, Broken Bodies, Migrant Farm Workers in the United States. In my view, it's an excellent example of what ethnography is about. Excuse me. Maybe I haven't been teaching since May, so my voice is not lasting. So Seth Holmes, in this book, Holmes, the author, is MD, PhD. He's a doctor of medicine and has a PhD in medical anthropology. And his ethnographic work involved, he crossed the Mexico-US border illegally along with several Mexican workers. I mean, very much a controversy in the US right now is about immigration. And maybe you have heard in the news about how Trump is trying to close the borders, which is not really possible because, I mean, it's several thousand miles of desert. And people from Mexico, people from other parts of Latin America have risked their lives, and many have died, trying to get into the US to work. So this anthropologist, he accompanied them on their illegal crossing. You know, he was aware that he may have some legal problems himself. He had some papers with him. He did get arrested, and he was jailed by the US Border Patrol and eventually got out. And eventually was able to join the farm workers that did get through, where they were working in the western US and Washington State, picking berries really fast all day. And the author, Seth Holmes, also tried to pick berries with them. He was trying to do everything they do to try to understand their experience. So that's a form of ethnography, an extreme form that is very risky to yourself, but he decided he wanted to, you know, have a really authentic experience. He found that he could not pick fruit fast enough but the Mexican workers could because they had to. Their families in Mexico were dependent on them sending money back, and so they somehow can push their bodies. But he just, I can't do this. It started getting knee pain, but anyway, that's why I chose this for an example of ethnographic methods, because it's an unusual, extreme and courageous form, you could say. And then we'll have this activity that we'll do that was designed by Dr. Sudarshan, based on obviously his knowledge of the campus, and where we can actually do this. We're not just going to be always having to sit in here during part of our class time that day. And this is also more on doing rather than discussing reading. I will talk about my own work, and you will talk about your work, and then we'll have another activity session on interviewing. This also was designed by Dr. Sudarshan, very, very simple assignment this time. More readings. This time you'll read one of my works based on the 2014 field work I did on recovery from schizophrenia, as well as a terrific chapter from a terrific book about people with schizophrenia in the US who are doing much more poorly. Very, very disturbing study Neely Myers did of people in a US city who are basically homeless, with severe mental illness, and having done work in Kerala, like Biju and I went to this place called Snehavid in Trivandrum, which is a psychosocial rehabilitation center. People with severe psychiatric diagnoses live there for some time, but most people in Kerala end up with their family. That's, even if things may not be so nice all the time, and there may be, parents may be ashamed their son is schizophrenia, they still get family support more than they do, at least in the US, and you'll see, and then work is easier to do here. That's one of my arguments. It's easier to get back to work with a diagnosis of schizophrenia in India. And we'll do another activity regarding field notes to sort of practice ethnographic techniques. And then we'll end with 2 sessions on that one and that one. 2 sessions on the movement for global mental health. Has anybody heard of the movement for global mental health? It's an international movement. They've actually given themselves, you see one of the readings I've given you, Vikram Patel, the movement for global mental health, British Journal of Psychiatry. He's declaring this movement in a big medical journal. And then he followed up with many other articles, and many teams around the country are trying to improve mental health. Excuse me. Patel, as you may tell, is from India. So are many of the people involved, but he's actually based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the UK, and the other people involved in this movement are based at mostly Harvard University in the US and some other places. So it's a global group. Sorry.
It's stressing on the global south.
Well, yeah, folk and many people from the global south, but they're all based in global north institutions, using techniques from the north. And so they're a very well-intentioned movement that I think also has some problems. So we'll basically hear, pro movement for global mental health on this day with Patel, and then this person who, this is from a book called Global Mental Health Anthropological Perspectives, about some anthropologists trying to help with this project. This article is based on Bolivia in South America. And then we'll hear China Mill's critique, Decolonizing Global Mental Health. The title is probably self-explanatory. She's a very radical, provocative, writer, and very critical, and you'll probably enjoy. And then I'll talk about work I did. These are two pieces from this edited volume you see here, called The Movement for Global Mental Health, Critical Views from South and Southeast Asia, edited by William Sachs and Claudia Long. So this came out of a couple meetings that happened over a few years with money from Germany, from William Sachs's in Heidelberg University, and he got a grant that brought me and several other scholars first to Istanbul. Half the scholars were from Europe and half were from India. Istanbul they thought would be an easy place to get together. and then me, the North American. And we did papers on reacting to the movement for global mental health. And then the next year we met in Malta, in the Mediterranean, same group, further work, and then this book is the product of those meetings. And basically it's about one half are scholars from India in public health, epidemiology, sociology, other fields, and half from Europe and then me, that offer cautions and critiques of the movement for global mental health, and we'll hear about what those are then. I won't explain it more now. And then I just have those two readings, and I just wrote review and advice for exam paper, that thinking that during that last class we'll talk about whatever your cumulative assignment is. And officially scheduled for Sunday the next day, but maybe I'll find out if we can just give you some more time. So maybe are there any questions about what I've said? Maybe we could take our break now. Is the timing good to? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The question is, in the current context where we are all exposed to social media,
Yeah.
how do we actually capture that culture? Because there's so much contamination from different sources in the country and also from outside.
Yeah. So you're wondering about sort of social media pollution of culture or something like that? I would say that the culture is whatever it is. Even if it's affected by social media, that's what it is. That's what you are going to get. You can't pull away the layers. You just have to understand culture as it is, which is always going to be a combination of many overlaying factors. The idea of a pure culture is something we don't really believe is possible anymore. So social media is just the latest layer. But I would say a good researcher should be aware of how social media may be affecting the perspectives of the person you're interviewing. You may wonder, where are they getting this idea, that they keep repeating to me? And maybe it's a social media. So I would just say it's just baked in to the culture now. And some anthropologists are studying social media itself, actually doing research, ethnography online, which is a thing now. So does that address what you're thinking of? Oh, sort of, okay. Yeah. Yes.
When you don't know the language, they don't translate, they also interpret it for you. So you might get irritated, or you just want to know what they're exactly saying.
Yeah.
Instead of they interpreting what he exactly said
Yeah.
and telling you. So how do you work that out without offending the person who is actually thinking that he's helping you?
Right.
But who's actually giving his own interpretation?
No, that's a good question. Well, that would be Biju. So actually, I guess the first. So we both would translate and transcribe the interview. So Biju would. Well, actually, the first time we did this, 1997, Biju would write out the interview in Malayalam, and then write out the translation in English. And then I would read both. I mean, I would have difficulty understanding the Malayalam, but I would use a dictionary and I would go to the English to try to understand. And then I would retranslate. I would make some adjustments to the English translation, but that was very time consuming. I mean, really difficult to get anywhere. So that's the only, I think that's a good, methodologically a good way to do it. That then we both have, some, I felt like Biju got the translation halfway to English, and then I got it the rest of the way, or even to, and then I have to write, when I write the actual quotation, like in a publication, it's never exactly the same, it never can be the same. In fact, that's what you're asking about was a big issue in anthropology, like in the 1980s. It was the postmodern problem. How can we ever be objective? Even if we know the language, we're interviewing somebody and they may be telling us what they think we want to hear, or maybe they're wary about us. They don't know who we are. We're a researcher, but maybe we all have some other purpose, so they may be withholding, But even if they're speaking honestly, they may not know themselves, represent their own experience. And then you, the interviewer, the ethnographer, you have your own mental baggage that will affect how you interpret their explanation. And then when you write something for the audience you're writing for as a scholar, you also will be twisting, even unconsciously, twisting what they say. So I would say that it's a problem that's not completely resolvable. There's always this gap between, a person's subjective internal experience and what the public comes to know of that. And that, I mean, for maybe 15 years, anthropologists were obsessed with this issue, translation, interpretation, how can we ever know anything accurately? And it's limited, So, but that's the method I tried to use with Biju. But when we did it again, I'm trying to think, in 2014, we did it somehow differently. It wasn't as time consuming. Anyway, it's, Yes.
Culture broker somewhere related to culture broker?
Cultural broker? Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's also related.
Is the term used by some people?
It's used by some anthropologists. I didn't use that term because in modern India, it's not, but some people use that term in a maybe a more traditional society, like the reading from Africa about African healing, the anthropologist goes in to this village and there will be certain cultural brokers that she gets to know, the people who step forward, as the representative of the town, of the village. So that's something that, but then that person can also bias your work. They may have their own agenda. It may be a man giving you the male perspective of the place. So that's one of the many, factors that divert us from pure objectivity in our work. Okay, I wanted to turn to talk about the readings, the 3 readings I gave you for today. I know that might be challenging to keep up with it as you were traveling. But these readings are meant to represent the earlier work and some basic insights in the field of medical anthropology. So I just put the readings here mostly for the people who are watching online. You know, everybody who's here has a copy, but just so they can see what I'm talking. I'm not going to go through the readings in depth, but just show you for the people online, show you the front page here so you can see. So first, let me talk a little bit about W.H.R. Rivers. And what I assigned you is a chapter from his book, Medicine, Magic, and Religion, this book. I'll scroll down. So people know online that they had just this first chapter, chapter 1 from Medicine, Magic, and Religion, short introduction to read. So this is, again, from 1924. Now, medical anthropology is the category that we're using in this class, and it's what I do. But that name, that field is relatively recent. Really, we didn't start calling anything medical anthropology until maybe 1970s. But nevertheless, people did research on health and illness and culture before that. There just was no name of a field called medical anthropology. So for example, Rivers in 1926 is just, he wasn't a medical anthropologist, he just was this person explaining how medicine, magic, and religion they overlap in many societies. He contrasts those societies to his own society, Great Britain, early 20th century. Let me tell you a few things about him. He's a really interesting figure, W.H.R. Rivers. Not only is he considered sort of one of the first people who really wrote in this field, he himself was a very complex in terms of his professional interest. He was a psychiatrist and an anthropologist. We actually have a tradition, in a way, not an official tradition, of psychiatrist anthropologists. And actually, we have one here, right? Maybe you are also. We were just talking about Sushrut Jadhav, who is at University College London, who's a psychiatrist and an anthropologist. And then I'm in the US, I work sometimes with Ipi Kalofonos, who's an anthropologist, psychiatrist, working on the Hearing Voices movement. So there's several people like this. I don't recommend it because you have to get MD degree and PhD. It'll take too much time. But that's what he did. So Rivers, one of the first people, was himself a psychiatrist and an anthropologist. Rivers is not just, he's actually probably better known in psychiatry than in anthropology. He worked at a military mental hospital during World War I, the Craig Lockhart Hospital in Scotland, and he did therapy with soldiers who had been, we want to say, traumatized or had PTSD, but those are current categories that weren't in use at that time. But his work, Rivers' work, actually helped create those categories. The idea of PTSD first comes from his work. So we have somebody who's influential not just in anthropology, but in psychiatry, psychology too. He was trying to understand the trauma of the soldiers. Like some soldiers fell into complete mental degradation and were hospitalized after something happened, during the war. Sorry? Shell shock, actually, that was the term back then, yeah, instead of trauma. You know, in fact, he had an article in the Lancet called war neurosis among soldiers. I think war neurosis was another term at the time. And other psychiatrists at the time would do things like they would take the soldier and they would give him ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, basically not as treatment but as punishment. You know, like you get the ECT until you agree to go back to the front of the war. That was the treatment. And Rivers said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is not the way to." And Rivers decided he would explore the soldiers' problems merely by talking to them, and he found out that he could improve their condition just through talking, and that was, you know, somewhat radical. Of course, around the same time, Sigmund Freud, you know, in Austria was also using just talk. You know, at the time when people were using more physiological interventions. So Rivers wasn't the first to think that talking can cure problems, but he was one of them. And it's also interesting that there's a novel, actually a trilogy of novels about Rivers' work in the Craig Lockhart Mental Hospital that I'll mention to, and a film, not a documentary, but a mainstream British film. I'll just show you that on.
So can you please repeat that word, the name that you used for the film?
What name?
You just mentioned it, but I think
The novel about novel.
Oh, the novel. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't mention the name of the novel. Regeneration. Did I say that? Well, I'll tell you the novel here. I'll just find it. The British novelist Pat Barker. I'm just trying to find. I thought I would find the whole trilogy presented together. Here we go. Regeneration Trilogy. There you can see the name. So I'll just read this thing at the beginning, just from a Wikipedia entry. The Regeneration Trilogy is a series of 3 novels by Pat Barker on the subject of the final part of the First World War, focusing primarily on 1917 and 1918. The novels blend fact and fiction, hanging on a framework of factual events, an interwoven set of fictional storylines of real people with fictional characters. The first novel of the series, Regeneration, was published in 1991, followed by The Eye in the Door and The Ghost Road. And here you have down here, the main characters are Dr. William Rivers. So this is W.H.R. Rivers. Actually, so there's his full name, William Halse Rivers. There's 2 Rivers in his name. You know, the British have the system of lots of initials before their name. So Siegfried Sassoon was one of his patients, who also was a famous poet in England. So the first of the novels, called Regeneration, focuses mostly on Rivers' work with Siegfried Sassoon. And then I've read the first 2. I've read Regeneration and The Eye in the Door. I haven't read The Ghost Road yet. So this is actually an interesting case of an anthropologist, psychiatrist being novelized. And then there's a film too. Let's see, maybe we can get this bigger. No, not like that. Just want to get a bigger image. I'll just click the Wikipedia entry for the film. So this movie is the movie adaptation of the novel. And Jonathan, you can see the movie poster. Jonathan Pryce up in the left-hand corner is the actor who played W.H.R. Rivers, famous British actor. He's been in lots of, he's even now in films. He's quite old, but he will play a wise old man in the movies. So this is a mainstream movie, you know, about the life of about W.H.R. Rivers' works and the life of the soldiers suffering the war traumas. I think you can actually see this on like Amazon streaming or some service like that. And interestingly, it's not just Rivers. I mentioned there's other psychiatrists, anthropologists, and there are anthropologists who are not psychiatrists who also influence psychiatry. I mean, the original idea of trauma comes not completely, but significantly from Rivers' work. One of the earlier definitions of schizophrenia comes actually from, what's his name? Now I'm just blanking on the name. The Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson was an early British anthropologist who taught in the US, and he has a theory of schizophrenia that he wrote up that was actually very influential in psychiatry, even though he was not a psychiatrist himself. So just some more examples of the mutual influence. And since I am talking about anthropological psychiatrist, we'll just look at
Arthur Kleinman is also a psychiatrist, right?
Arthur Kleinman. Yeah, actually, thank you for that example. Yeah, Arthur Kleinman, well-known American anthropologist, is also a psychiatrist. He practiced psychiatry in China, and that's where he got some of his ideas about how culture affects mental, or actually somatizes, is what he says, mental illness. You know, the suffering comes out through the body in China more than it does in the West, was one of his.
You mentioned about the talking part about Rivers. I think Kleinman also refers to an active process of listening in his ethnography with the patients.
The Rivers listening, you mean?
You mentioned talking
Yes.
as an important component of his ethnography, right? So
Right.
in Arthur Kleinman's ethnography also he refers to the process of actively listening to the patients as one of the central
Yes.
part of this.
Absolutely, yeah. And I actually think that's why maybe anthropology and psychiatry have had this relationship, because, I mean, the anthropological encounter is about speaking and listening, you know, and but yeah, that's the key. That's a key. I mentioned also I'm doing work on open dialogue, and that's all about the exchange, which unfortunately doesn't happen. You know, in my field work, I sat with the district mental health team in Trivandrum when they went to the OP clinics, and they would have a long queue, and I wrote down the timings. They would spend 2 to 3 minutes with each patient. You know, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Here's refill. You know, next. So dialogue can be very much missing from psychiatry as it's practiced today, but it was very central, you know, at one point. Just want to mention, I'm going to click on his UCL profile. Just to mention a current anthropologist, psychiatrist that you should know of. I know we were just talking about him, that some of you do know him. Sushrit Jadhav, professor of cultural psychiatry is his title. So basically he's trained in anthropology and psychiatry. And he works in London. And he calls himself a street psychiatrist. He works in the streets with homeless people. Yeah, exactly. And he's very interested in caste, you know, and the Dalit experience and mental health. That's one of his main things he's working on, writing on right now. Anyway, I've introduced Rivers and the whole idea of the anthropologist psychiatrist. And I gave you an excerpt from his book, Medicine, Magic, and Religion. Now, the excerpt I gave you, by current standards in medical anthropology, many people would not find it that interesting. Just, you know, he's from very basic assumptions. He's referring to certain people as savages, you know, barbarians. You know, here I'll just put those terms on the board actually, just so that. Yeah, I think I'll just use the board instead of switching to the pad, and hopefully that'll work. In this piece, I know that I should stay with the terms for the camera for a bit. Hopefully everyone's able to get these. So he's using this terminology that today is, politically incorrect, inappropriate. We've gotten rid of these evolutionist hierarchies. Well, within academia, we get, and the public still uses, this is still common sense ideas. So, this is also the product he's writing in 1924. This is the thinking, this is the terminology the British would use at that time. And the terms are actually based on, there's an American anthropologist, Lewis Henry Morgan, who worked in the late 19th, early 20th century, and he developed categories of human evolution, including savagery was the first one. Barbarianism, they're not synonyms, they're actually different stages. Barbarianism comes after savagery, and then civilization comes after that. There's also subcategories. So he's using this terminology that would be commonplace. But these are a little bit different. This is supposed to be more advanced. But you see a paradox too, because at one time he's trying to tell us that these savage peoples have these beliefs about religion and illness, but then he says, in many ways, our beliefs, and he means our British beliefs, are not that different, because we also have, if you look at the whole system, we have rules about etiology and treatment fitting etiology. So he's also trying to say that they're similar, that they think even though he's using this terminology, that they are thinking in a similar human way. You see a lot of that in early anthropology. They have this very evolutionist vocabulary, but then the point that they're making is more progressive. Actually, Claude Lévi-Strauss, I've assigned you one of his articles too. He wrote a book called The Savage Mind in the 1960s, in French, La Pensée Sauvage. And he was using that ironically, because he was showing you basically how the so-called savage mind was just as capable a mind as any modern mind. It was just working in a different context. So sometimes these words are used ironically. Anyway, he's basically making the point that medicine, magic, and religion are not distinct concepts in much of the world. In the UK, at the time he's writing, medicine is bracketed off from magic and religion. In fact, he says magic seems to just have gone away anyway. We still have religion in England, but medicine is something separate. But in these peoples in the world, the savage peoples, they're intermingled. They're almost indistinguishable in some ways. And part of this is based on his own field work. He alludes to several cases, probably in unfamiliar places, names of islands you've never heard of. These are all in the Torres Straits and the New Guinea area. So this is in the Southeast Asia, around New Guinea, and what's it called? It's the region north of Australia. Papua New Guinea, yeah, but there's also islands around there. Melanesia is also part of the area where he's working. So he spent some time there. That's where he did work as an anthropologist. As an anthropologist, he went to Melanesia and he studied the kinship systems, which is something many early anthropologists were interested in. But while he was there, he started noticing their beliefs about what causes illness and what causes misfortune. And so he, in a way, collected some insights on healing and wrote this book. So, so he also wrote as an anthropologist about their kinship system in the Torres Straits regions of Melanesia. Let me just give one example maybe from the reading. Page 7. This is just on page 7 of the readings. He divides a lot of these ideas into categories. On that middle paragraph, he tells us that if, maybe I can blow up for the people online, and maybe for you too. If we examine the beliefs of mankind in general, and highlighting doesn't work very well for this. Okay, this is where we are. If we examine the beliefs of mankind in general concerning the causation of disease, we find that the causes may be grouped in three chief classes: human agency, which is believed that disease is directly due to action on the part of some human being. Okay, and this is still a belief, right? It's not like, I know from the field work I did in India, there's Mandaravadan, right? People we spoke to, many, and said, oh, well, this other part of our family is jealous, and so they went to a Mandaravadan and they sent some sickness. So that's this idea, it's human agency can be involved with it. The action of some spiritual or supernatural being. The action of some agent who is not human but is yet more or less definitely personified. And then what we ordinarily call natural causes. And he kind of suggests that in modern medicine we just look at number 3 today. We've discarded the other 2, but I think it's very important. In the next paragraph he also says the second category still exists in the hand of God of our statutes. What he means is that there's legally a role for God, in the law. It's probably the case in India, and it is in the US and the UK, that, some problems can be, if you can't attribute causality or liability, you don't know why it happens, you just say it's an act of God. It's even in insurance policies, if you can't figure out the liable party in some accident, it's an act of God and the company doesn't have to pay or something like that. So he's recognizing the similarity, that these exotic beliefs are still there in modern British culture.